All right, welcome everyone to this deep dive, a presentation by Safety One Source. For you safety folks out there and really anyone looking to, up their workplace safety game, we're going to be getting into something pretty important. Variances.
Yeah, how to get around those pesky safety rules.
Well, not exactly getting around them, more like when and how you can legally deviate from standard safety regulations.
Okay, yeah, legally deviate. That's better.
Much better. And for this, we've been looking at some excerpts from the Code of Federal Regulations.
The CFR.
The CFR, specifically Section 1926.2. So our mission today is to understand when an organization can operate outside of these strict safety regulations. In other words, when can you get an authorized exception to a safety standard? And what's the whole, framework behind that?
All right, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is a variance? I mean, in the context of workplace safety, obviously.
Right. So the CFR defines a variance as basically permission to deviate from a published safety standard.
Okay, so it's like you get to do something different than what the rules say. But obviously there are rules around that too.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't just decide to do your own thing. It's not arbitrary. This goes back to the William Steiger Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, the OSH Act.
Oh, yeah, the OSH Act.
Yeah. And the regulations we're looking at, they specifically say that variances under this part of the CFR, they could be granted under the same circumstances as you would find in Section 6BA or 60 of the OSH Act. So there's a legal basis for all this.
So there's a process. It's all laid out somewhere.
Right. If any of you safety pros out there are wondering how you actually get a variance, the CFR points us to Part 1905 of Title 29.
Okay, yeah, Title 29, the rule book.
Exactly. The CFR is like the giant rule book. And then Part 1905 lays out all the steps for applying for and hopefully receiving a variance. It's a formal application process.
I see. It's not like you just ask and they say, sure, go ahead.
Nope. There's a whole system. And actually, something I found really interesting was, how these regulations are all connected?
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the text explains that if you apply for a variance under Section 1926.2, remember that's the one about construction safety, well, it's automatically also considered under the broader OSH Act.
Huh.
And on the flip side, if you're going for a variance under the OSH Act, but it's related to construction, guess what? It's reviewed under the Construction Safety Act, too.
So you're basically killing two birds with one stone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's really helpful for safety professionals, right? You're not running around to a bunch of different agencies. Now, here's something else I thought was important for those of you who are learning all this stuff. What happens when you have a safety standard in Part 1926? So that's our construction focus, right? But it's also found in Part 1910, the part that covers general industry.
Oh, okay. So you have the same rule in two different places. So what happens to the variance then?
Well, this is where the scope of a variance comes in. So if a construction safety standard is also part of those general industry standards, a variance that you get for that specific standard, it counts as a variance under both the Construction Safety Act and the OSH Act.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. So one variance can actually cover a lot of ground.
Exactly. And, the key takeaway here for all of you safety pros is that while, yes, there are these set standards for workplace safety, there's also this legal way to explore different approaches. That's the variance. And it's all about ensuring safety, but maybe in a different way.
Yeah.
Maybe in a way that's even better than the original standard.
Yeah. It's like thinking outside the box sometimes. But, you got to do it the right way, go through the process.
Absolutely. Understanding these variances, I think it's so important for managing safety effectively. Especially in situations that are maybe unique or complex, it gives you that flexibility when a standard might not be the most practical or even the safest option. But of course, you have to show that your alternative is just as good or even better at protecting workers. And as we mentioned before, 29 CFR Part 1905, that's your go-to for all those detailed procedures.
Bookmark that page.
Yeah, definitely bookmark that one. So here's a final thought for everyone. How could understanding this variance process better, how could that help you as safety individuals to really advocate for better, more adaptable safety solutions within your organizations? Think about it. It's about going beyond just the standard and finding ways to truly make the workplace safer for everyone while still meeting those regulatory requirements. Thanks for joining this deep dive brought to you by Safety One Source.
Thanks for listening, everybody.